Hi. I wanted to start with the date and time. 16th of May, 2025, 3:19 p.m. Wanted to get one of these. I wanted to pick back up where I stopped. Mostly just to get more of it done and out of my head before the. I'm gonna be busy this weekend. That's all it is. So we left off in 2117. Smith has just rolled into our city. So he has a lot of missing time in the story between 2036 and 2117. I'm kind of skipping over a lot of the chaff having to do with establishing a new identity and kind of the trodden ground of discovering that you're different, and people are going to notice that eventually, and it may not be a good thing. But yeah, we skip over a lot of that. So Smith is in our city in 2117. He meets Roland Red, who's actually Roland Roberts, but that's a whole. There's a reason that he uses a pseudonym. There's a reason he's distancing himself from his relatives. The only one who he thinks even remotely believes in him is a half brother, who he remembers as being somewhat difficult to talk to from a previous timeline. That's Roland's whole timeline's a muddled mess, which I'm not super upfront about, partly because it was sort of a late addition to the story as a whole, so I've kind of written around it. Like I've integrated that aspect of it into Smith's story and less into Roland's. Roland's story only really unpacks itself when he's getting to tell it from his perspective, or when I'm telling it from his perspective. Take that for what you want. So it's just not important right now. What's important right now is that Roland appears to simultaneously be like 20 and know everything, and to be semi-perfect. For Smith's story, that's kind of important right now because he hasn't been able to trust anyone on a personal level in a long time, possibly ever. And here's somebody who suddenly like gets him. There's reasons for that, but we'll get into them later. I'm a little bit vague on the Our City arc because it was where this story started, but it wasn't the most interesting story to tell. There's some plot MacGuffin under the city that belongs to an alien empire that was buried there at some point in the ancient past. This empire was one of the first civilizations in the galaxy and is still there. Down toward the center of the galaxy, less so. Earth is out on one of the spiral arms of our galaxy. This empire that spans however many star systems and however far is not even close to the middle, galactically speaking, but where we're like 50,000 light years from the center of our galaxy. This empire is spread down on a closer orbit, like 10,000 light years. It's real far down there. I was playing with some ideas, like they experience time slowly because they're closer to the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy, so they would be experiencing time dilation from our perspective. So maybe them having dumped some MacGuffin out here on the spiral arm probably with a probe, or at most with some explorer that left. For them, that wouldn't have been that long ago. For us, it could have been billions of years. For them, it could have been hundreds of thousands, hundreds of millions, just an order of magnitude or two fewer, in terms of how long it's been since they haven't had whatever thing is now in our planet. But the arc revolves around that, and the rogue alien armada that rolls up. They don't have a sanction. They don't have, as far as the Empire is concerned, the right to roll up to another planet and order them to let them rip out the biosphere so they can get to the MacGuffin. And they don't take kindly when the people of Earth basically go, yeah, we're not going to let you destroy our planet. We're busy doing that ourselves, to get to your doohickey. Go away. So yeah, that story starts around 2117. In 2118, we get a bit more of Fairy Blue, Renette Lambert, and that's a whole time travel-y, timey-wimey thing in and of itself. That, again, because we're looking at Smith's story as chronologically as possible, we're not getting into right now, but suffice to say, that man has his fingers in everything. Almost nothing that happens in the story doesn't have Smith to at least blame for it. Sort of. The invasion is in 2119 and 2120. I'm just kind of skimming my notes and give you the bits. Basically 50 rogue Marstarian starships roll up. They're very obviously hovering just over the city that our protagonists are in. It helps that, for reasons we'll get into later, I keep saying that, they have foreknowledge of this. They knew that the aliens were going to roll up, despite the world not having been introduced to this yet. In a setting where everything's on the table, this is just par for the course. You know where I think that this par for the course, everything on the table thing comes from, and it took me years to figure this out, or at least to be able to state it. So, when I describe myself as an atheist, it's a very simple thing. Does not believe in a God. Period. That's it. That's the only thing that describes. The popular consciousness of it is that it describes a whole slew of personal beliefs, of religious convictions, of political affiliations, of personal nonsense that you do at home, and that's not the case. Like, all that word should do, and all that it does, looking at it from a prescriptivist stance, states that the person who claims to be that thing, atheist, is someone who does not believe in one or more than one gods. They do not believe in gods. But as far as I'm concerned, everything else is on the table. Like, not for nothing, if you tell me I believe in ghosts, I'm gonna raise my eyebrow at you a little, but I'm not gonna write it off the way that I would write off God belief. I'll put it under the same scrutiny. Show me proof that thing exists, and okay, fine, it exists. But yeah, everything else is on the table to be observed, to either be observed or not, and to be discussed or not. And it's fair game. That's kind of how I approach this story. Everything is fair game. It's, at its core, when it started, it was very much a ripoff of like Golden Age sci-fi. Um, but it has fantasy elements. It has like Umbrella Academy, Harry Potter, Wednesday, uh, like urban fantasy shit going on in the background. One of the stories that I had written some samples of, and eventually I built the magic system for this other story first, and it was it. How do I put it? Despite it having elemental magic to it, it was never like an Avatar ripoff. As much as I liked Avatar and as much as it's in the popular zeitgeist, my thought process never went to Avatar for this. It was actually it's actually an Oron High School Host Club fan fiction that kind of spawned the idea um, of just there being a class of people in the world that could do elemental manipulations. Um, and having actually reread it sort of recently, it kind of holds up. It was fine. Like there, there's nothing wrong with it. It has a decent mystery to it, even though it kind of comes and goes very quickly, and then the story's over. Um, but yeah, so it got this idea in my head about this. Excuse me. This like subset of people who put their understood magical skills to work. If you can do magic missile with your hand, maybe you'll be a soldier. Maybe you'll be the guy uh, that starts reactors running. If you can move giant mounds of earth or water with a thought, maybe you'll get into earthworks and do dam construction. One of the stories was literally the water manipulator. Amanda had a job in America, and she was very like, "Girl, I don't want to go there. They kind of suck," um, which is very timely. But she goes there for a job to work with the Army Corps of Engineers to essentially pull the water back from a broken dam before it can break completely, so they can go in and do the repairs without having to drain a reservoir. Um, and like she and others with the similar powers put their skills to work in the world, because if such things were common as people who can just move vast quantities of water with their minds for reasons, they would be part of the economy. Like, you wouldn't just not. In an ideal world, the guy who can move a bunch of earth with his mind, or the person who can move a bunch of water with their mind, would not be cashiers at Walmart. Like, they'd be doing something a little more important, a little bit better paid. They would be doing meaningful work, not barely making rent. Um, I feel like we've kind of lost that in our society. Um, I look at some people that are going to school now, and I say, I hope you know what you're getting into, because I certainly didn't. Um, I feel like I have a ton of interesting bits of knowledge, bits of skill, but I don't specialize in any one thing. Um, I don't have a degree in something that the economy decided was useful. Um, and if this was 500 years ago, I would probably spend half my year farming, and the other half, some patron would be paying me to, I don't know, paint or sculpt or tell fun stories that hopefully don't get me exiled from some city in Italy. Um, and it was the era of, if you were creative, and there weren't many, or at least not many that are remembered, because not many had patrons. Where if you were good enough, you had a better connections, if you could somehow distinguish yourself, then you got a patron and you got a cushier lifestyle. You could make art, um, and that was a real thing. Like those people we remember, whereas the laborers we barely remember. The people that did the subsistence tasks we don't remember at all, with some minor exceptions. I'm sure I'd have to look into it, which I'll be saying a lot. Have to look into. Always trying to do more research for these things. But in different times, I'd like to think that I would find a patron and do something worthwhile. As it is, dear viewer, hopefully one day you're a patron of mine. You bought the book. You bought a movie ticket. You paid some minuscule amount of your limited funds to see my creative thing. And if you didn't, I mean, look, I'm all about dusting off your tricorn, because if purchasing isn't ownership, then piracy's not theft. But I would hope to at least see you join the hype train. Anyway, so I have completely derailed my train of thought. Anyway, so whole alien invasion thing is going on. Roland had a lot of information from the future to help hold off this attack. They're a little earlier than he expected. They were less than a couple of weeks from having the prototype of a defense cannon ready, to protect at least the city. But what they got instead, to kind of buy time, a couple of agents from this alien empire got called out. Again, for more foreknowledge stuff. Roland was able to contact them and go, hey, we're about to have some of your rogue people coming at us. We could use some help. So they sent a couple of agents with limited defensive technology to assist. Their help amounts to basically a shield generator that covers a goodly chunk of Europe, where our city is in Italy. I sort of like visualize it being somewhere on the Adriatic Sea. As for the exact location, it's just sort of there, like it felt right. I don't know. Look, I liked Porco Rosso as a kid. Better a pig than a fascist. But yeah, so they bring this shield generator. They put this thing up and they basically tell them, okay, we brought you the generator. You have to come up with the power for it, and the rest of the offense is on you. All we can do is give you defensive help and information, but we can't actually raise our fist to them. To which Roland goes, okay, I kind of figured that going into this. Thanks. Had years earlier manipulated things so he could get direct control over a couple of nuclear power stations in Europe to power this thing with, and does pretty successfully. It creates a political problem later, but it doesn't matter for the sake of this story. For the sake of this story, no one can stop him siphoning the power he needs, and that's the point. Alien Armada is bombarding them, and just when it looks like their ships are about done trying to break through the shield, they go, okay. Basically, you can almost argue it's a false surrender. They go out for a parley, and while that's going on, the alien ships had come into the atmosphere, so they were building up tons of heat from being inside a heavy atmosphere, from basically floating just a few kilometers over the city, from firing constantly on this shield. Um, Both sides were happy they stopped shooting because, the defenders in our city, because the shield was not going to last forever, and the alien commanders, because they were already getting reports of overheating components and melting components on the ships. Um, it's a sci-fi thing that you don't see too often, ships overheating, because they do. Like, you're talking about running, who knows how these things are powered and how they're cooled and how much heat buildup there is, presumably from hovering in a gravity well and firing weapons. They build up heat, so that's the weakness here. That's the thing to exploit. They have this defense cannon, which is more like a defense grid at this point. Um, it's high powered lasers. They're just dumping directed energy into these ships, already overheating, already starting to melt. It doesn't take much. All it takes is dumping in a certain number of joules until they're shot straight through, and watch the fireworks. The ships start falling out of the sky. Um, at which point, I haven't really decided whether or not they hit the city or fall out of the city, or how many survive the attack. Um, the command ship survives the attack because it's bigger and less prone to overheating and wasn't firing as much as the ancillary ships. The building where the command signal for this laser cannon is coming from gets shot into splinters. This big tower in the middle of the city. And at this point, Smith, who was assisting the guy who was setting up that system, this other guy, Theo, they're both MIA. Like, they're buried under the building. That's a whole side story unto itself. At which point, Smith, from about 400 years later, pops up. And it's not... I sort of have part of the scene written already. It's not obvious that this is a much older time-traveling Smith. I think the way I describe it, his clothes are a little different, but it's still essentially the same uniform. I say uniform, but their organization doesn't really have a uniform. They just sort of all agree to wear certain colors to try and identify themselves. They won't really have a uniform for a few years at this point, and even then it's never official. Long day at work, sorry. But he rolls in with a better looking coat in the same colors and steps in and starts working. And I think that this, let's see, the building is shot down on Christmas Eve. And the younger Smith that we're at this point familiar with, and Theo, aren't rescued until January 1st. Like, it was bad for them. Smith, being immortal, gave Theo all the rations he had, like, because Smith will happily die and come back, whereas Theo would have almost definitely died when his own rations ran out, when his own water ran out. But again, it's a side story. We can get more into Theo later. And from there, they only really have to deal with the command ship, a couple of ancillary ships, and whatever's left of the rogue army. And to be fair, it's not a huge assault force. It was mostly essentially a naval campaign, except for their commander, the guy who is leading them, who basically told all of them, "Hey, we're not really rogues. We're going to go save this MacGuffin that got shot out by a previous rogue. We're doing the right thing, we promise." And his inner circle knows that that's bull. But most of the guys under him don't. They honestly believe that they're doing something justifiable. Um, Everyone's the good guy in their own story. And sure, these are the antagonists of this story, but we get more into them later. Uh, Something else I keep saying. But yeah, so that goes on. Smith's story here goes on for 9 years. I'm skipping over quite a bit. Like, that's the R City arc isn't super written yet. Like, it's here, but it's not here. But we skip forward to 2126. Smith has been around, and he's at the point where he's starting to realize, the first people I've trusted with me, with everything I've been, are aging. They're going to die, and he doesn't want to be here for that. So he gets into a very nasty fight with Roland over it. Like, it's not a physical fight. It's not a slap fight. He says a lot of things that he regrets for a long time. Don't we all? And he leaves. Like, his plan is to join colony projects under assumed names and hope nobody notices them. People do, but the instructions from on high, because Roland's in charge of this organization, at least for the moment, are to ignore him. Let him run his temper tantrum down. Which makes sense later, but for the moment, it just looks like Roland was so hurt by what Smith said to him that he just decided, you know what, it's not worth keeping this guy in my life. It's not worth chasing someone who can be cruel that way. And Smith was cruel. Like, he was. Oh, I guess that's it. We'll get back to it.